there's a certain intelligence, let's call it, that's innate within every one of us. This drive to um, not just reveal, but to express our innateness, right?
Mhm.
But it's hard for us to express that without choosing from a really clear and connected space. So to me, the unbecoming is sort of that art form of revealing what is most deeply true and real about us.
Yeah.
And I think it's a confronting journey for each of us to actually even want to be willing to, even in the moments that we really don't want um,
Yes.
to gradually develop more and more capacity for that internal foraging.
Hey guys, so we recently had the opportunity to sit down with Scott Feinberg for a conversation and began with this idea of unbecoming and becoming, and ended up going in so many different directions that we could have never planned for. Unfortunately, we lost the very beginning and the very end of the recording. And at first, we were super disappointed. But after thought about it, we realized that this was an opportunity for us to have a conversation as a team about the conversation. So I asked Abby and Jesse to watch the conversation and sit down with me and talk about what stayed with us just before we invite you guys into the conversation yourself so that you can hear a bit from our team. And then you can get the bits and pieces that you need and want from the conversation. So, team, what did you guys think about the conversation?
Yeah, I can kick us off. I think my initial thought was what an honor to be able to share space with somebody that we have used really in almost every single part of our journey through Counseling Reimagined over the past few years, whether it be in retreat spaces, whether it be working one on one with clients. I use this stuff all the time in breath work and just a simple way of like opening up reverse graffiti and always getting filled with the knowledge that we need from it, whatever the universe is pointing out to us. So just being able to sit down and share space with him was absolutely incredible. And he's amazing.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It was so fun to have him in, knowing that like he's kind of been with us along our
Yeah.
counseling reimagined journey for so
Yes.
many years. It's like, oh, here's that guy that wrote those things.
Uh-huh. Yes, that we use all the time. And then just to be able to hear his insights and viewpoints on everything. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah, to piggyback off of what Jesse said, I mean, he speaks the way that he writes, like
I know.
so eloquent, and everything just kind of flows out of him. You can really just gather that everything that he puts in his poems is exactly how he lives his life.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That was really cool for me to see as well. And even I was looking through the transcript of it and I'm like, some of this is poetry.
Right.
Absolutely. Yes.
So that's so much fun. What would you say was your overall feeling after watching it?
I felt seen.
Mm,
Mm,
Like all of the things that I've gone through on my own healing journey was like brought to the light. This is the process of healing. And I love that he touched on so many different ways that we go through healing, but yet for so many people, it's such a universal feeling or process.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that.
yeah, Abby, I love that of feeling seen. I was leaning towards like validated as well, which I think those two work
Mm.
really great in tandem. Um, One part that has really stayed with me is when he was talking about entering into our own wounds and how when we start to get to that part, that's like where the healing happens, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that has stayed with me for so long because it's uncomfortable and we're getting to expose that hard part. And in that, that's where the
Mhm.
healing happens. And there's actually so much knowledge and passion and everything else that comes behind it. I was just like, oh, like this healing, there was something about it that reminded me that the healing doesn't always have to be scary, that
Mhm.
it can
Yeah.
actually be filled with joy and compassion and curiosity and understanding. And there were so many other words that he could put to it instead of like the negative words that we use with it so much. And none of that was there. And it was really beautiful.
Mhm. Yeah, like it was all part of the magic and
Yeah.
part of life and how we're supposed to be here and experiencing this thing called life as humans. And I love that. One of the things that he said that really caught my attention was in the idea of unbecoming and becoming. He mentioned that we can't unbecome without becoming, and
Mm,
that the unbecoming was almost a propulsion for the becoming. Right? And it's like once we start this process of digging through like what actually is ours and what do we want to keep and hold and what do we want to let go of, I think that process literally puts us into becoming whoever it is that we need and want to be in this part of life.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's probably exactly what you hear so often in therapy sessions, because I think with the way that we've been conditioned in society of this is what you need to do, this is who you need to be, kind of pulling
Mhm.
back some of those layers and really uncovering, well, who are you really is kind of like that starting point of all of the healing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point, Abby. And that definitely does happen in therapy all the time, which is, a really beautiful process. And one of the things I loved about the conversation with him is just the context in that, you know, um, discovering who you are and letting go of what doesn't belong to you doesn't have to look the same for everybody. And like that made me wonder, what does unbecoming mean to you guys? Like what has it meant to you in your life?
Hmm. Letting go of societal expectations
Mm,
and figuring out who the true me is without feeling like I need to perform for anybody else.
yeah, yeah. Letting
And
go of the performance. Whew, that's a big one.
and it's hard to do,
Mhm,
but there's a lot of freedom that comes with it too that I'm starting to
mhm.
figure out that's very beautiful, and a lot of unraveling that comes with it that we have to learn. One thing that he said is his mantra that I keep going back to this week is, "This is not that."
Mm,
And
mhm,
I have found myself using that in so many things, and I even think
mhm.
about that with the unbecoming of, "This is not that, like, this is not what I have to do or what I'm supposed to do, but how does this feel for me?"
Yes. Mm, I love that and can relate so much. I have also thought about that saying from him multiple times. What about you, Abby?
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about that quote as well because for me, the this is not that is like a reminder to my nervous system of like, you're not in that fight or flight response anymore. You don't have to be in that season of life. Like, this is a new chapter that you're in right now, and to kind of hold
Mhm,
on to that. Because I think, like, as we're in this healing journey, we do get triggered by our past, and so
mhm.
to remind myself of, okay, this is not that. I don't have to be in that space any longer, and I can move forward. Um,
Yeah.
I think, like, on that note, to me, like, the unbecoming becoming part, is really just that, right? Of like, this is not the expectation that I need to live up to. And where did I get that expectation from? And I think a
Mhm,
lot of times for myself, like recognizing that I'm the person that's even placing these expectations on myself, that it wasn't
yes.
anybody else. And where did I get that idea from? And then that goes
Mhm,
into worthiness and the whole self.
mhm. Yes. Yeah, that's so true. I've experienced that multiple times throughout life, but I think it's especially true in my career. Like, for example, I remember the first year I was in business, like me and a colleague of mine had a goal to like hit a certain number worth of revenue. And once we hit that number, I was like, interesting. Like, here we are, and we made the number, but why was this the number? Where did that number even come from? Like, why was that the goal in the first place? And when I actually processed it, it was related back to like some unspoken rule that I had from my childhood that was just totally irrelevant to
Yeah.
anything in my life right now. And I was like, "Oh my god, like, that's so interesting." This was something that felt so big and so important, and then when it got here and it happened, I was like, "Life is still the same."
But did anything really change besides that? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Nope. Definitely not. So, all of us are in the office together and in this healing space together, and we see a lot of the same clients and uh, are very community based, and we have the desire to help so many people. Why do you think this conversation or conversations like this matter right now?
I think that's one kind of beautiful thing that has even happened, with COVID and some of the changings of social media presence and everything like that, is this ability to feel more connected, right? Like we
Yeah,
had the opportunity to sit with Scott, who's in Florida, and we had a great conversation like he was sitting on our couch
I
at
know.
Great Magic, which is so beautiful. And a lot of, some of these connections started on Instagram, right?
Hmm.
With you sending him messages and emails
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So I think there's this really cool ability right now that we have in the world of getting to connect with people from all of these spaces
Hmm.
and being able to bring this community together, but we're not all at Counseling Reimagine in Johns Creek, Georgia, right? We have Abby
Yes.
in Nashville and I'm currently in Charleston, but we're still able to have this community of people. And I think it goes to show of number one, how important community is too, right? But community can look so different. So we can have
Mm.
community in our community circles, even at Counseling Reimagine, which has become like one of my favorite events that we have. And we can have community popping up really all over the world.
Mhm.
And it's really just sort of taking that propulsion of what he talked about into
Mhm.
the unbecoming and some of that unraveling and reaching out to those scary places and being like, "Am I allowed to connect with these people?
Yes.
What would it look like if I did?"
Mhm.
Sort of that unlearning of what we can and can't do, and just being able to bring everybody together to hear all of these different viewpoints that we have, right? We
Mhm.
able to bring this community together of people from all different backgrounds, all different stories, all different phases of life, and just sit down and have a casual conversation with Scott Feinberg and Tori Tatum from Counseling Reimagine. Like, what a beautiful world that we live in right now, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so connected. So easily connected.
Easily.
Connecting with him was, like, so much easier than I ever thought it would
Yes.
have been, which was a really nice shocker, and, I guess, like so 2 things come up with that. One, when he talked about the importance of tribe, I feel like that's what you're describing, and like, we find our tribe in our community, and safety happens in our tribe. And when it's safe, then true healing has the opportunity to take place. And, that is ultimately what we try to cultivate. And that's what matters most to us. Um, I'm going to explain in a minute kind of why this conversation got started in the first place. But Abby, I wanted to kind of throw the same question to you. Like, why do you think this conversation matters right now?
Yeah, to kind of touch on what you both just said, I mean, when I think back to when I first started my whole process into mental health, one of the first researchers that I discovered was Brene Brown. And she talked
Mhm.
so much about the importance and power of vulnerability and connection. And I feel like this conversation was exactly that. So these
Mhm.
conversations, really getting into the heart of being a human being, which is what you guys were talking about, is so important. And I think it's always
Mhm.
going to be important because that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm, that's good. Yes, it is. So, yeah, I mean that speaks to how the conversation took place to begin with. And I think for anybody who wasn't on like the live call that we had, just to explain a little bit about that, this conversation was started because I was taking Abby's workshop on the artist way. And it's all about like finding the artist within you and doing things like that on a regular basis, like every day tapping into that part of creativity. And I had been on social media and I was thinking, like, it would be very nice for people to have just a moment of like serenity, silence, some peace. And maybe I can read like a poem to them. And if they want to take a breath with me and participate in that, it's at least an option that's online. And so I pulled out my favorite poetry books, and Scott Feinberg was definitely one of my favorite poets because, as we've said before, his work has been everywhere with us, and we've used it for many years now. And so I created a reel and was about to post it. And then I was like, I just read this man's entire work online. I should probably ask for permission. So I was like, his email has to be somewhere online. So I found his email, emailed him, and kind of told him, like, your work's been with us through retreats, through counseling sessions, just through us hanging out. Like, thank you so much for what you do. I was wondering if we could share it online. And he was like, yes, absolutely. Please let me know if there is any other way that I can help. And I was like, yes. So I was talking to Abby and she was like, ooh, how could we collaborate with him? And I was like, how could we? So I was sitting at my breakfast table one day and his book was right there. And I was asking that question. And I just glanced down, and it was the first time that I had really paid attention to the tagline of his book, which is The Sacred Art of Unbecoming. And for those of you that don't know, the tagline for Counseling Reimagined is the art of becoming whole. And so I was like, well, there it is. That's how we collaborate. Like, unbecoming and becoming are almost one and the same. They're just opposite ends of the spectrum. And so that is how this lovely conversation got started.
So
Can I
good.
just say, like, with the artist way, I like the whole time you're explaining that, I'm like so excited in my intro because that's what the artist way is all about. When
Yeah.
you're reconnected with your magic and your inner guidance, the answers come and the opportunities present themselves as well. And so I love how this conversation came about because some people might look at this on the outside and be like, I'm so afraid. I don't want to reach out to my favorite poet. Like, they're never going to respond to me. But you
I
took the
did think that.
and look what happened.
Mhm.
Thank you. Yeah, that's so true. And I just love the fact that I got to experience that workshop with you because honestly, like it changed the way I thought about my approach to creativity and how I wanted to just participate in everyday life. There's so many things that I've taken with me, including like doing the morning pages. I do that almost every day still. And it helps me tap into something that I wouldn't otherwise. And it gives me ideas and allows me to like run with my creative imagination. And that's such a gift. So thank you for that workshop.
And it also makes me think there were a few words that were used a lot during the conversation:
Mm.
uncertainty, compassion, and courage.
Yes.
And Tori, the entire time that even those messages were happening, that's kind of how this conversation started. And I love
Mm.
just naturally looped around, and he didn't even know, obviously, but
Hmm.
that's kind of what it took for this to start, was the uncertainty of like, can I do this? Will
Yeah.
he allow me to do this? The courage that it took for you to be kind of like Abby said, I'm going to email him. Great, let's. And then sort of like the compassion that you were able to give yourself to be like, I'm allowed to show up into this space in this way.
Hmm. Yeah.
So those three words kept sticking out, and it was just such a serendipitous moment for kind of everything to show how
Mm.
circle it became.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And I appreciate you saying that. Yeah. I think honestly, if we could all live by that, like how creative would our lives be and how brave, right, is that to live in that way? And I think about that. That really is the healing process, whether that's like signing up for coaching or signing up for counseling or doing breathwork sessions or going to a women's retreat. It's like you're uncertain, you have no idea what is about to happen. Just holding that like curiosity and compassion towards yourself that you don't know what's going to happen and however it's showing up in your body is okay, but like the willingness to do so.
Yeah. Well, and here's one quote that has stayed with me since this conversation.
Mhm.
Uncertainty is a prerequisite for almost every quality that we have in life. Without uncertainty, there's no mystery, no discovery, no surprises, and no magical qualities.
Woo!
That's what it takes, right? Because without that
Yes.
uncertainty, then we don't have anything else that comes along with it.
Yep.
And it takes kind of a scary word sometimes that we think about, right? The uncertainty, the unknown, the unbecoming, all of the things, the right?
Mhm.
It puts this beautiful spin on it of without
Yes.
it, there's nothing. And we
Yes.
need to embrace that right? That uncertainty, that unbecoming, all of the things to enjoy life, to see what happens.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, to be surprised, like, joyfully
Have magic,
surprised.
right?
Yes.
Have mystery,
Uh,
discovery.
right, right. I I don't remember where I heard this the other day. Oh, I think it was an Eckhart Tolle, uh, speech maybe. He was talking about, how excitement and anxiety are, like, the same biologically in your body, like, physiologically, how they show up, they are the exact same. The only difference is the story.
Wow. Wow.
That's it. So, like, to your point about the conversation, I could have been like, "Oh, well, I don't, like, technically have his permission. This isn't my work. I'm probably not gonna do this." And, uh, or, like, do the opposite, like, curiosity, willingness to see what happens, and maybe some, like, sprinkled in hopefulness that, like, life will surprise you, and it
Yeah.
might be good.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the 3 C's are like the opposite of fear.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm, the 3 C's.
That's what I'm gonna
We
call
could
it.
do a
That's how
lot
I'm
with
gonna
that.
remember
I love it.
That is so good. All right, guys. Well, there is so much more that we could say, but we don't want to tell you what to take from this conversation. We want you to experience it yourself. And so, as you watch, we simply want to invite you to notice like what stays with you, what challenges you, what maybe feels familiar or helps you feel seen, and potentially what part of you might be asking to be seen. So, this is The Art of Being Human, a conversation with Scott Feinberg.
There is a certain um, intelligence, let's call it, that's innate within every one of us. This drive to um, not just reveal, but to express our innateness, right?
Mhm.
But it's hard for us to express that without choosing from a really clear and connected space. So to me, the unbecoming is sort of that art form of revealing what is most deeply true and real about us.
Yeah.
And I think it's a confronting journey for each of us to actually even want to be willing to, even in the moments that we really don't want to, um,
Yes.
to gradually develop more and more capacity for that internal foraging. And as what we encounter along the way is, we've spoken to deeply in theories like internal family system and attachment theory. The great spiritual traditions speak deeply about these processes and how to work with them, and just even right now what we're understanding about accessing self through the lens of the body and working with the nervous system, and all of these ways are sort of the inner journey of accessing what I think most fundamentally beneath that condition could never actually be harmed or lost. And when we contact that, we realize that there is a security that is pervasive, and that it stretches into all parts of us and all aspects of us, and everything that appeared to be maybe fragmented was fundamentally whole. And
Yeah.
then that I think it is natural for that wholeness to want to emerge. And so we can access that, not just a conceptual understanding of this, but a deeply felt sense of presence of our own deepest nature. Um, then there's like this effulgent quality of it wanting to come out. And so to me, that's sort of the unbecoming, maybe the unbecoming and the becoming sort of wrapped in into like I don't think we can unbecome without becoming. I think there's a spontaneous reverberation right back out, and I don't think it's linear. It's very zigzaggy, and but it is progressive as we move through the back and forth and side to side of it all, of our own journey. Um, it's almost as though that unbecoming becomes the propulsion for the becoming, and
Mhm.
and so I see it as something that is innate to the way the process of being an experience of being human works once we start to catalyze that journey. And the last piece I would add is just all of those imprints I don't hold as even as pejoratives in a sense. They're not flaws. They're not shortcomings about each and every one of us. They are doorways into inquiry, and they're also ultimately in the becoming side, they become the doorways into artistry. Whether that's, whatever, that's creating a business, if that is writing a poem, if that is painting, or singing, or whatever it is, if it's loving, if it's just any outward expression, to me, doesn't, it's not about ridding ourselves of that. It's about alchemizing, those adversities into the artistry of our life.
Yeah, that is beautiful. You said so many things in there that I can deeply relate to, and that bring me back to like the process of therapy, but not just therapy, like the process of healing in general. And there's so many different avenues to take and so many ways that we find healing. And there's the proponent of it where you're like uncomfortable in the beginning, right? Like something is not settling with you. You feel this urge to shift or change to some degree. And then you seek out the thing that is hopefully going to help you on your path to doing so. And in that, it does become this like up and down of like, yay, I'm doing it. God, this sucks. Like, yay, I'm finding relief. Like, man, this is really hard. As we're going through the unbecoming to the becoming. And I think that's what I see a lot in therapy is, people begin the journey and then those like pains or discomforts of like sitting in the process of figuring out, wait a minute, I'm not all these things that I took on or that were given to me or that I have been assuming about myself for a really long time. And I don't also I don't quite know who I am yet. Oftentimes people don't even have the voice of like the positive innate person within them to help guide them in the beginning. So it's like this process of starting the unbecoming and that discomfort of sitting in not knowing what is coming next. And I think I related to a lot of that in your pages in reverse graffiti. There's so many seasons of life that I picked it up over the past few years, some highs, some lows, where I really felt seen and heard in just the words that you had on the page. And one of the things that you wrote was then one day she realized that her worth was not dependent upon somebody else's ability to recognize it. And I remember reading that. For those of you that don't know, I told Scott this previously, but his book has come with me in many different areas and avenues of life. And I read it at retreats that I've hosted for women. I've taken it on personal retreats. I read it with some of my clients. I read it with my friends. And if it's a particularly meaningful thing, then I'll write down the date in the corner of the page and like where I was when I read it, because it's fun to kind of go back to. And I got to do that as I was reviewing, just to kind of have this conversation with you. And that particular line really stuck out to me. And I remember being in the depths of, I don't know, I guess like one of the dark nights of the soul that people refer to. And it was a really difficult time for me to choose, like, do I continue on the path that it appears that everyone wants for me? Or do I begin to listen to this like inner voice inside myself? And I don't even know what that truly sounds like yet and what that even looks like. But recognizing that if I choose me and I choose my inner voice or the direction that I want to go in, then the people who are meant to be there will be on that path. And my worth is not tied to or dependent on what anyone else thinks or recognizes. And it has to come from me and my confidence in myself and my actions.
Yeah, that's a big leap.
Mm-hmm. It's scary.
You're scared. It's like being on a trapeze and then you're letting go, but you're not on the next one yet. And
Yes.
yeah, you're just in the middle. There's something about that in between space where the seeming groundlessness
Mm-hmm.
actually reveals where our authentic ground is. But
Yeah.
it's scary. Absolutely. I think there's something about when we are moved really by that impulse to step into a greater expression of ourselves that requires us leaving behind things where they have historically provided safety and security before we had access to our inner guidance.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, through a parts work lens, what's happening is as those exiled parts are essentially in this sort of pilgrimage towards self integration, it's really scary, not only for those parts, but for the protector parts that have been entrusted to their safety. The ones that said, we're safe when we're not seen. We're safe when we're not heard. Whatever it might be, whatever that story is. So the idea of stepping out of the known and the familiar scaffolding of perceived safety, what once was safe, isn't fulfilling its intended function anymore, but it resembles threat to our protector parts. So it exposes us to the potential of rewounding. So I do think there is a sort of reactive contraction that can occur. And I think part of this conversation that's so important and part of this work for ourselves is recognizing that the contraction is the precursor to the propulsion that we were talking about before. Like one of those little cars you had as a kid, and you'd pull it back in order to let it. So every time that recoil into the old pattern of contraction, if we have enough access to self to be able to say, hold on, this is what it looks like, this is what it feels like. And I think if we can do that enough times, it stops feeling so scary, and we can start to essentially, from the parts that are more like preemptively fearful, those manager protectors are like, I always feel like their work is to earn the trust with self.
Yeah.
And so that particular piece, how do we earn trust? And it's like, well, through a series of disconfirming experiences to what once was threatening, so we can unlearn that and go, oh, wait a second, I'm still here, we're okay, this is not that from the past. And that's become a mantra for me, is this is not that. And really to live from that. And then we started, it inevitably goes, well, then what is this, right? Like where there's like what you're describing is this disorientation of being in the unfamiliar. And the next thing I think that we learn is that what Alan Watts called the wisdom of insecurity, the sense of uncertainty is the prerequisite for almost every quality that we deeply laud in this life. And you start to look at like without uncertainty, we don't have mystery, we don't have discovery, we don't have surprise, we don't have spontaneity or
Mhm.
or possibility. We don't have like serendipity and synchronicity and like all these magical qualities basically require us not knowing. It's like, would you, as a kid, if you celebrated Christmas, I mean, could you imagine walking down to your Christmas tree and all the presents are unwrapped? That would be
Right.
awesome, right?
Yeah.
So the uncertainty just basically means we get to be in the real time unfoldment of it. And when we source
Yeah.
around, not from what could be, but what, I'm going to use double negative here, but from what could never be not. Like,
Mm,
and then you realize, oh, this is just a gift I get to unwrap in a way I've never lived it before, even if it means me and
yeah.
what my identity is. You know?
Oh, I love that so much. The idea of like unwrapping your true self and getting to discover who that is. That's a really, really beautiful concept.
Yeah, it's such a gift to get to continue to, because every time we know it, we get to know ourselves more deeply and more intimately. I think we fall deeper in love with life.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think on my own healing journey, curiosity has been like the greatest gift in allowing me to be present, be mindful, experience love and joy and excitement, and to take me places that I wouldn't have ended up. I mean, even like just today's conversation as an example, I did not have a conversation on the line with Scott Feinberg in, my roster for this year. And I've been toting around your book for forever. But it's like curiosity led me there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I couldn't agree more. I used to keep a Curious George on my altar, just like curiosity at all costs. And
Yes.
one other piece that shows up for me is that when we bring curiosity to the point that you were making about the discomfort, and we bring courage and we bring compassion to that, that piece is less about like the manager parts learning trust, because we're getting closer to the where the wound actually is imprinted.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is when we meet ourselves in the wordless,
Yeah.
and it's our presence that heals, not our knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And it's there's something about being proximal to our pain in a really surrendered way that feels ironically good. I don't know if anybody, I would love to hear people's thoughts on this when we get to open up the conversation. But yeah, I've had a lot of experiences where getting really close to the unguarded pain, I think it feels good because it feels true and it feels real. And I think anytime we're close to what's true and real, it feels good. It's just kind of not good in it that there's an absence of pain, but good in the sense of like,
Mm-hmm.
this has been asking for me, and I've been distracting myself in avoidance through, whatever it is, creating projects for my career, or my family, or this or that, and to finally sit down, me, and give my attention, energy, and attunement to where it is asking to be met in service of um, healing or integration of parts that have felt othered in some way, just attending to them with the courage of an open heart. I think it's the greatest medicine, and I think it's the medicine of the work that we're doing in conversations like this, just by being able to kind of peel back and talk about what's beneath the surface, and get a little closer to what might feel raw, but it's
Mm-hmm.
really what's deeply asking for us.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of the process of EMDR and like taking people back to a really painful memory. And I've been doing EMDR for like 10 years now. And so throughout that, I've adapted what I could and integrated internal family systems into that. And so lots of parts work happening in like the memories and the healing. But what I've witnessed over and over again is it really is just being able to bring up the pain of the past or of the trigger or whatever it is, whatever's driving your nervous system to not be okay, to bring that up, to witness it, and to bring presence to it, like to bring that into the moment right now or to bring yourself into the moment with it. It's almost like that is teaching the other parts of you, the exiles or and the parts that we have just like really neglected or like shunned away. It's bringing them to the moment that you're in and showing them like, see, we're actually right here. Like this was painful and we can acknowledge that. And it was incredibly hurtful at the time. And maybe we needed like XYZ. But here we are right now in this moment, and I can witness you with curiosity and compassion. And through this presence, so much healing takes place. It's like the person genuinely becomes integrated.
So beautiful. Yeah. I mean, that's it. I think that's the work, and that you're talking about unbecoming. And that's just a beautiful description of it for me. Like that when a part learned they were, some way other than, the wholeness that we each are, and getting to unlearn those things so that we can realize our own true nature is really beautiful. And again, I don't think it's like a one and done or reading it in a book or taking it in a workshop or something like that. It is through direct experience, as often as it needs to happen. And I think that's a part that sometimes gets left out of this integration work, is that it sometimes it ges really siloed into their containers. And I think anytime we open a dialogue with a part of ourselves, to at least extend the invitation to travel with you after, like you're not putting you back in a box and
Yeah.
putting you back in exile after the conversation, but there is the agency for that part to sort of, in and out, and like take the little baby steps. One of the tools I love to utilize in coaching, I like to do a lot of like get up off the sofa and move and like try to like experience. I don't know if you've ever come across this tool. It's really powerful, but it's like spectrograms. Like you create like a spectrum in the room. So let's say like if historically I've only felt safe in the sort of closeted and hidden, like this side of the room represents being totally closeted off. And then the other side of the room represents being totally liberated out in the open. And then we stand at each point along the spectrum, tuning into our nervous system and what the body is giving us on a scale of 1 to 5 at like each point along that spectrum, as far as we feel called to move along the spectrum.
Yes.
And it's challenging. We can actually take a step backwards with one foot, as if to plant that foot beneath and behind the mental emotional layer into that more spiritual essence of us, whatever name you want to give that. Self is perfect. If you believe in self, there are of course traditions that like Buddhist theory doesn't have like a self necessarily, but there's a true nature. And so maybe that's the phrase to use. And so when we step back, what does it feel like from here, from self? And what if we could experience what feels like like a really charged 5 on a scale of just being 1 foot out the door, but with 1 foot also anchored in self, and how to start to open that dialogue. So I really love the like getting into those spaces with people in ways that can start to wire the nervous system around safety and what has felt unsafe. And like what you described, it blending IFS with EMDR is like There's so many tools out there to access, but I think underneath it all, that is what we're talking about, is that journey back home to ourselves, and then what does life look like from that space?
I know. I know. That's so good. I love the fact that you get people up off the couch or chair, whatever you're in your room. And I know from being a therapist who can do the same thing with people sometimes, how uncomfortable it makes them in the beginning. And I have 100% been that client or participant myself at retreats or therapy or coaching, whatever it is. And in the moment, you're like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Like, no, I don't want to stand up and like push this thing, or I don't want to hit this pillow with this, or I don't want to throw this ball at the wall, or whatever it might be. But there is something that's so absolutely necessary and needed when it comes to healing: movement that begins to move things through your system so it's not so stuck. Because oftentimes we become so paralyzed in the past and what protectors have come up in our nervous system that we don't even know how to move. So the idea of moving in this type of way is really uncomfortable in the beginning, but also very good.
Yeah. I think it also gives people a language that they may not have had in words. And when they can say, like, this simple one over here, I'll keep this like looks like it's just like a singing bowl, but it's
Yes.
duh. And
Yeah.
there's like all these things in it. And so as people are like, let's say like they're on that spectrum or whatever, we'll start with like, that's what I'm carrying. And where do I carry? Is it behind my back? Is it it all in one hand? What does it feel like to bring it forward? What does it feel like to feel support here? And maybe, if my hands can come under, and what if you give me some of that weight?
Mm.
What if we drop into the breath? What if we feel that foot that's behind us? And then as it feels lighter, take something out if that feels true for you. And you start to give like really visceral, tangible ways, I think, for people to wire in. And that to me has sometimes been so much more powerful than conceptualizing, what is occurring. And that's been a language to learn in some ways. For me in coaching has been, like I'll think it and then say it. Like my language has often been in words. So starting to move into wordless experiences, I think, is really fun and challenges growing edges for, coaching client alike. So.
Yes. Oh my God, I love that so much. I feel very inspired. So, for any of my clients that might be on the call, get ready because we're going to be holding some bowls and removing some things from those bowls.
So many fun, I think once we get comfortable with the discomfort, it's you're feeling yourself grow, and it feels good to grow too. And so
Yeah.
you start to crave that. And it doesn't mean that we, you know, seek out support or sessions only when there's something wrong, and
Uh-huh.
crisis management, it's growth. And I think that's so awesome to get to come in when, like, I love when people will come into sessions and say like, I don't know what we're going to talk about today. Everything's great. I'm like, oh my God.
I know. Those are my favorite. Yes. I had one of those today. I was like, ooh, these are the best ones. And we ended it. And she was like, well, I did not expect any of that to come up. I'm like, yes. So good.
Yeah. Try not to live in it always and never, but it really does feel so often when people come in that state, there's capacity, there's so much more resourcing, so there's capacity for exploration and excavation, there's growth, optimization, there's like psychotherapeutic education. There's so much for us to get to unpack in those spaces. So I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear that people are coming to see you and continue their work, not just trying to get from like negative to neutral, but from neutral to positive.
I'm grateful for that too. And I think about like, so for me and my healing experience, anything that we offer in Counseling Reimagined is something that probably helped me along the way. And so we integrated that. So Counseling Reimagined is kind of like a form of integration because it's bits and pieces of what have helped me heal in my own journey. And I'm curious in your process of like unbecoming to becoming and the sitting in the pain, what were some of the things that you did other than like coaching or therapy that may have helped so that we can share those with other people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first thing that really showed up for me was yoga. Never heard the word before. And, um, it was just, it was a girlfriend at the time, um, said, do you want to go to yoga? And I was like, you know what? I remember I heard about this once when I was in college, and it was like a stress management class, and the teacher talked a little bit about it and taught us a little meditation. So very vague, but I never did a practice or anything and didn't know what it was really. And I went, and instantly it spoke to me that I was able to directly impact my whole being. I was just trying to think of the word. I'm like, there's not even just a being. My entire being felt different leaving than when I came. And I thought, wow, what a thing this is, that somebody could drive to a building and then an hour and a half or whatever later you leave and you're a completely different human, but somehow much more like yourself. And so something that, works with the body, works with the breath, the energy field, the mind. I think there's a lot more depth of the technologies of the yoga tradition than most of us have come to ever realize. And it's an infinite abyss of transformational tools. And so that has really been the biggie for me. Pranayama, meditation, mantra, and some of the more internal practices, but also the studies. I love reading books that are, 2, 3, 4,000 years old. That's like my like love. And I love teaching from them, and our trainings. We, really dive deep into philosophy. We just did a whole immersion on the Bhagavad Gita through the lens of parts work and polyvagal theory, and it was
Wow.
cool to see that with an understanding of the philosophical system that it sits in, and those things have like really really spoken to me. And so that's in the formal sense, outside of like the coaching and therapy. Um, I honestly think relationships, I'd have to say, has been my biggest teacher. I just feel like I've had my heart crushed so many times that it's been a journey, man. Like, I mean, it has really, really going back to like my first relationship in high school, like serious relationship, it just ended with a lot of heartbreak, and I've really had to explore that. And going back to what we were talking about, like what I learned about relationships, how to deepen the relationship that I keep and maintain with myself, and how to really be a good um, steward of my own caretaking in those moments when I felt really isolated and depressed and alone. Those most challenging moments for me have been the greatest teachers, the greatest growth. And even like not the full like heartbreak, like end of relationships, but even just being in a committed relationship with my partner now, and we've been together for 6 years. And I just think that relationships are the work of our lives, and our wounding is relational, and so our healing is too. And I think that sometimes gets missed, that we're trying, oh, I was outsourcing this or codependent
Mhm.
alone until I figure this out and love myself. And
Yeah.
I think there's some healing that needs a relationship for it to happen. And I just feel grateful that I'm in a, a committed relationship with a partner who has the wantingness, the willingness, and the capacity to repair and
Mhm.
to explore what comes up. And after each one of those things that feels like it can take us to the edge, I feel like it brings us not only closer to each other, but it brings each of us closer to ourselves.
Yes.
And so much healing and unlearning and rewiring and And that's been powerful. And then I just think anything that triggers me in a way or activates such a charge in me that it creates a dissonance from self is a teacher in disguise. And so when enough presence returns to not leave that without the lesson, if I can turn my triggers into my teachers,
Yes.
then now like now I'm working with something because I'm turning the negative to the positive, so to speak.
Well, that's like a true journey of getting to know yourself, right? Like, I think through the healing in relationship with other people, like you said, you begin to heal different parts of yourself that you really and truly can't heal alone. And the more we do heal in relationship with other people, it's so interesting how your relationship with yourself begins to bloom and you begin to know yourself more and have a greater like trust and faith and intuition on what you need and what you want, what you like, and like trusting maybe curiosity for it to like lead the way and take you somewhere really cool. But it is really fascinating. And it's something that I think is explored a lot here in the therapy room and just in life in general, is that it really does take relationship to heal.
100%. Yeah, I think there's so much healing that just requires that. I think we're relational by nature. And one aside or example maybe is the like from a nervous system lens, the way that's inscribed is to think about like a gazelle that is just like out in the meadow getting like a lion sees the gazelle and starts to chase it, and the gazelle accesses realizes it can't fight, and so it goes into a flight mode and runs. But as the lion catches up to it, the gazelle goes into a freeze, stops, feigns death. Lion drags the gazelle back into the lion's den and thinks it's dead. So it then goes back out to hunt again. When the gazelle senses that the lion has departed, it gets up and it runs, so it sort of reverses that process out. But what's interesting, the point I wanted to bring up is that it runs back to its tribe, and once it gets to its tribe, it does that shake out.
Yes.
The trauma leave the body, and I just think that's so telling that safety is wired into the nervous system level
Mm-hmm.
after we make our way back to that social safety, and that's tells us so much, I think, about
Mm-hmm.
the nature of how nervous systems function in concert with each other.
Yes, 100%. That really reminds me, like the shaking and the nervous system release reminds me of breath work. And, we do somatic breath work in the office, and that is some type of community. Either it is a group breath work where you have multiple people in the room, or it's you and the facilitator, Jessie. She's on here. She's phenomenal. Um, and like there is something about allowing yourself to fully release thought, tapping into your own breath and allowing your body to bring up whatever it is it needs to. And often you experience like the tension, the heavy breathing, the um, shaking. Sometimes you feel like you need to stomp. Sometimes you feel like you need to move. Like so many different things have happened. Like I have witnessed and experienced breathwork sessions where you felt like you were birthing something, where you were like punching the air, where you were ripping things up, like so many things that somatically needed to come out. And it reminds me of the gazelle, like shaking off what happened in a very safe space because you have the facilitator there who can come and lay hands on you or support you or help you up or give you whatever it is that you need in that moment to have the physical release that needs to happen.
Amen. Yeah, I came across this recently, and this one little sentence just hit me so powerfully, and it was, the therapeutic relationship is the intervention. Yeah, that's it. I mean, and so whether that's co-regulation, borrowed functioning, compassionate presence, whatever you want to call it. There's
Yeah.
something about a safe human being connected and present while you're moving through what you're moving through that is the migration of these parts back into innate wholeness.
Yes. It reminds me of and makes me curious about like when people are in the process of going back to like the unbecoming and then they're doing all this work and maybe they're physically, emotionally, spiritually letting things go. Oftentimes they have difficulty connecting with like the curious, compassionate part of themselves. It's like sometimes I will enter in the question like, okay, if this were someone that you really loved and cared about, how would you treat them in this exact same circumstance? And I'm wondering if you have any other input on that. Like, how do we guide or teach or show someone to um, find or like witness or integrate the part that's there all along that is curious and compassionate?
Yeah. Well, that's such a nuanced space, and that's such a great question. I love that question. uh, and I love the tool that you reach for. I think that's really wise, is to invite them into the sort of the surplus reality of that, what if, the imaginative, and going towards a similar way of accessing what feels inaccessible. I think that finding where something already exists and bringing it over to where it doesn't is the technique that I'll often find really powerful.
So now that you have experienced the conversation with us, we wanted to come back together one more time because, like we said in the beginning, the conversation didn't end when we logged off.
So, Tori, one part of the conversation that I loved hearing from somebody that gets to work alongside of you, there were so many different modalities that Scott was talking about that he uses in his practice. And I know I heard you mention, um, you said something along the lines of, if any of my clients are on here, buckle up because we have so many fun modalities that we're bringing into the office. Has there been any aspects from the conversation with Scott that have stuck with you that you've allowed to bring into your own practice after that conversation?
Yeah, I love that question. The conversation with Scott reminded me of why I started Counseling Reimagined in the first place because I knew I wanted to be a therapist, but I wanted it to be different than just sitting down and having talk therapy on the couch because I firmly believe there are so many different ways for people to find healing and it is not a one size fits all. And so when Scott started talking about some of those modalities with like holding the singing bowl and taking things out of it and allowing someone to come in and support the weight of that, it reminded me of a lot of the somatic therapies that we do in the office and that I do in session with clients. And those are the things that get us majorly outside of our comfort zone, but those are the things that create lasting, sustainable change because it challenges something to our core that literally you can't be the same after that. And so, yeah, I enjoyed kind of revisiting those things and being re-inspired by Scott to do more of that, not just in my life personally, but in the therapy rooms with clients and also in spaces such as retreats. So I am super stoked about that.
Oh, I love it. Yes. Well, and I've even noticed it in ways outside of Counseling Reimagined as well. One thing that I loved that he talked about was getting all the animals out, even. And it can be
Yes.
something as small as that. And I've even noticed that in my parenting style now. I was sitting on the floor getting to hang out and play with my 6-year-old, and we were building with Legos. And even that reminded me of like asking questions, right? Once again, here we go, Abby, holding those 3 C's of compassion and
Yeah.
curiosity for it. But like, buddy, what are you building with that one? Why is that one
Yeah.
so tall? Why is that one so short? And it's amazing of just the little things of even curiosity and play can come out and
Yes.
aspect of our healing journey as well.
You know what? I love that too, and it reminded me, so my therapist, back when I started, like, my trauma therapy journey, she did sand tray therapy, and she had these huge bookshelves full of so many figurines, and I thought, like, one day I wanna be trained in sand tray therapy because this is amazing. Like, even as an adult, getting to look at those things and, like, pick what sticks out to you is so cool. But talking about, like, creativity, I had a block in my head about, like, I need sand tray, like, training in order to do this. I can't buy figurines until I've done that for some reason. And
Right.
when he, like, pulled out that little box and was just, like, showing the little
Uh,
figures, I'm like, "Oh, I can do that.
it was a bunch of safari animals, and it was
Yes,
perfect.
I can do that. I can do that right now. I can go to DG and get that this
Yes,
moment."
yes.
Tori, I love that you're saying that too, because I feel like, again, just back to the conversation, one of the biggest things that we do is we like to get in our own way. Imposter syndrome. I can't do this until I've done the training. But really, that first next step was right in front of you.
Exactly, exactly.
Unbecoming. And
Yes.
it is a sacred art.
Oh, that is so good. So good. Well, guys, we don't think that this conversation was meant to like particularly give you answers. We just hope that it made you curious. And we want to thank you so much for being a part of it. And yeah, thank you for being here with us. We really appreciate you.